I, 32 male, was married to my ex-wife, 28 female, for 2 years. It still shocks me that after all the promises my ex-wife made to me, she stooped so low and cheated on me. My wife and I first met at my cousin's college graduation ceremony. She had also come to attend her brother's graduation, and we got along well. After the ceremony, she gave me her number at request, but it took me weeks for her to finally take my calls. After weeks of her not taking my calls, I coincidentally bumped into her one day, and she apologized for not taking my calls and offered that we should go to the movies together. Going to the movies was our first date, and from there, multiple dates followed, and we ended up marrying after a year of dating. In the beginning, marrying my wife brought me so much happiness. She ticked all my boxes, and everything was smooth between us. She was great in bed, a good cook, and she took good care of me. We were always so happy together, and I loved what we shared. While my wife worked as a data entry clerk, I worked as a heavy machine technician, and what we earned was enough to take care of us. Aside from being happy that I married my wife, I was also glad she had a great family. I grew up with my dad, and he raised me as a single parent. And the only cousin I had was my dad's younger sister's daughter. One of the things I always looked forward to was a family of love, and that's what my wife had. She had 2 brothers and 1 sister, plus her parents. Her family were so close to each other, and since we all lived in the same town, we used to hang out once every month as a family unit. Whenever we had a picnic, family dinner, or a gathering, all of my wife's siblings would come with their spouses, and this was how I got close to one of her brother-in-laws, my wife's sister's husband. We were around the same age, which allowed us to bond well. Most times, if my wife and her sister were hanging out or going out of town for the wedding of a mutual friend or an extended family member, her brother-in-law and I would go out for a couple of drinks or watch football together. As time passed, he wasn't just my favorite brother-in-law. We became very good friends. Months after my wife and I clocked a year together, I noticed she was getting closer to her sister's husband. It's not like there was anything wrong with being close to her sister's husband, but I felt something was different with their relationship, and some other changes followed. For example, if we went for a family dinner, my wife would talk to everybody except her brother-in-law, which was very unlike her. And if her brother-in-law and I were hanging out, and I mentioned my wife in our conversation, he would avoid the topic and chip in something else. Regarding their closeness, if we all went somewhere, maybe the park or shopping mall, my wife would prefer to hang with her sister and husband than with me. If we sat at a table to eat together, she would prefer to sit next to him and leave me alone wherever I was. I quietly watched her for months to ensure my head was not messing with me. Around the same time I noticed all these changes, my wife's attitude towards me changed too. It got so bad that we could not converse without her mentioning her brother-in-law's name. Our intimacy dropped too, and she barely allowed me to touch her. Whenever I tried to, she'd complain about being tired or not being in the mood. Sometimes she'd even say she was seeing her monthly flow even when I knew she wasn't. Before I suspected something was going on between her and her brother-in-law, my wife did not care about her looks whenever we wanted to hang out as a family unit, but she suddenly became so concerned. She'd wash and curl her hair in advance, pick out a dress that would expose her thighs and cleavages, and apply makeup. It became evident that she was trying to look good for a reason, and even her sister and other family members noticed the great difference. The whole time I had been suspecting my wife. Deep down, I wanted to be wrong. But one night, after waiting for almost an hour for her to stop chatting and blushing on her phone and spend time with me, she said she was tired as usual and slept off. I was so hurt by her actions and neglect that I went through her phone to see who had been making her blush like that. When I accessed her phone and went through her social media accounts, I stumbled on her messages on WhatsApp with her sister's husband. She saved his name as Bestie with 3 love emojis, and I suspected he was the one before I opened their conversation. I could not believe what I saw when I went through their conversation. Not only was my wife having an affair with her BIL, as I suspected, but they had also exchanged nudes. Even that evening, he had sent her pictures of his private part and wrote a long erotic text of all the nasty things he would do to her when they met again. They planned to meet in a cheap motel in 2 days, and they kept recounting their last escapade together. I was so disappointed and didn't know how to feel. To even think that they were making jokes about her getting pregnant for him and keeping the child. I felt so betrayed. At that moment, I felt like stuffing her with a pillow. I had to control my anger because she wasn't worth getting a life sentence for. Shortly after I was done with my emotional meltdown, I had an idea to teach her a lesson. So I took screenshots of their conversation, especially the parts where he sent her his nudes, and they mentioned meeting at the motel to have fun. Then I cleared all traces that I went through her chats. That night I couldn't sleep at home because I was hurt and kept crying like a baby. Even though I suspected something was fishy, I still could not believe my wife would break me like that after all our promises to each other. The following day, I went to work from the motel I spent the night at, and she kept calling me the whole morning to find out why I wasn't at home when she woke up. I cooked up a lie for her, and I told her I'd be home after work. When I got home that evening, she could tell something was wrong, but I told her I had a bad day at work. Meanwhile, the following day, she had planned to meet with my BIL at the motel. She didn't know I had called her sister and explained everything. She was more shocked than I was and promised she would not confront her husband. Also, I created a WhatsApp group chat, added all her close family members to it, and told them everything I found out. I dropped the screenshots I took there so everyone could see, and they couldn't believe it. Her sister kept doubting that my wife would do such a thing to her. After everyone was out of their shock phase, we all planned to go to the location of the motel they would be using so we could catch them in the act. On D-Day, which was a Saturday, I watched as my wife dressed her best, did her makeup, and lied to me about going to see one of her old-time friends who had just given birth. I acted all calm and watched her as she left. About 10 minutes after she left, I drove to the location and notified her family that she was on the move. Eventually, we all rendezvoused at the motel as planned and decided to go to her room. There were 5 of us, excluding her father. When we got to her room, I knocked and pretended to be room service, and she opened the door with a white towel wrapped around her chest. The moment she saw that I was the one, she froze. Then, we all entered the room one after the other. Her BIL was in the bathroom, and when he heard voices and came out to see us, he ran back into the bathroom and refused to come out. My sister-in-law was so heartbroken, and she attacked my wife. Right there, I told her to her face to not bother coming home and that she'd be hearing from my lawyer soon. Her mom and brothers could not even say anything to her. They all stood there in awe. I left the room and left them there so she could deal with her family. Immediately I got home, I threw her stuff out of my house and contacted a divorce lawyer to start processing our divorce papers. She tried to call me and beg a couple of times, and I told her she was insane to think I'd take back a shameless cheat like her. The worst was that she had no one to turn to. Her family disowned her, and her sister cut all ties with her because she couldn't handle the betrayal. I had to divorce her and officially get rid of her. Her sister also divorced her husband, and my wife had to move in with her friend before she left town. Later, I found out that their affair started under my roof, and they had it going long before I suspected something was happening. My wife claimed she continued the affair with her BIL because he was not as boring as me. I guess she will have enough fun living with disappointed family members for the rest of her life. I'm fine now, but I decided to not marry again. It's better to be alone so I don't experience such disappointment and heartbreak again. OP, you did a great thing by divorcing your ex-wife, and her sister did the right thing. Indeed, she is a shameless cheat and had no shame in cheating with her sister's husband. Ignore what she said. OP, you being boring had nothing to do with this. She only used that as an excuse. It's a stupid excuse, by the way. You should be glad you found out earlier. If not, you would have raised her BL's child. Concerning marrying again, it's all up to you. You don't have to if you don't want to. Most women have no shame. Sadly, it's becoming a norm. Anyways, I'm happy to hear you're doing better. Thank you for sharing your story with us. Now, let's move on to the next story of the day. My name is Lucas. My ex-wife, Aria, and I were married for 3 years before we went our separate ways. Aria and I lived in the same town, but I did not know her until I was 25. Even with that, we didn't start dating until 4 years ago. We dated for a year, and we married for 3 years. I know this might sound simp-like, but meeting Aria was love at first sight. I liked her the instant I met her, and I had this conviction that she would be the woman I would spend the rest of my life with. She was intelligent, hardworking, and pretty, and I felt we were a match made in heaven. Even though she gave me a tough time before we dated, I didn't mind waiting for her until she was mine. Fast forward to after we got married. I was literally the happiest man on earth. Although I did not express myself so much, I was glad we were finally married. Everything was blissful for the first 2 years and some months of our marriage. We enjoyed each other's company and literally did everything together. For a long time, I had been hoping to find a woman who would love me wholeheartedly, and when Aria came into my life, I was relieved. While we were married, Aria and I didn't have so many issues, and also we knew it was very normal for us to butt heads from time to time, and we understood that. We tried as much as possible to settle whatever issue we had before it got to the extent of keeping malice with each other. Aria was someone who loved to hang out and party with her friends, and I was someone who loved to stay home and watch television. I barely went out except it was extremely important. In fact, I would prefer to cancel on my friends and stay at home to rest or do something for myself. For once, I never stopped Aria from doing her thing. I supported her and allowed her to go out with her friends as much as she wanted during weekdays, and then on weekends, we would spend quality time together at home. The reason I never had issues with her always going out with her friends was because I trusted her, and I didn't expect that she would do anything to hurt me or even cheat on me. I also kept to my promise and didn't do anything that would hurt Aria. Even before we married, I stopped talking to a couple of girls I used to, not because they were bad people, but because hanging around them always would lead me to temptation. Also, Aria had told me about her ex-boyfriend and how she was hurt and heartbroken when she found out he was cheating on her with multiple partners, and I didn't want to cause her that kind of pain again. This was why she didn't say yes to me the first few times I asked her out. She claimed she was still deeply hurt and needed to be sure she had healed properly before entering another relationship. I had also been hurt in my previous relationship, but that was a very long time ago, so I could relate to her feelings, and we assured each other that we would never cheat or do anything that would cause us pain. We agreed to not have kids yet because we wanted to spend time with ourselves and ensure that we were not holding ourselves back, so our kids would enjoy the full love of their parents. Things were fine between us, and even as Aria continued to go out, I never suspected anything off. Nothing changed about her. She still acted, dressed, took care of me, and did her wifely duties. So, I was so shocked one day when I received a call from a friend of mine to come and take my wife. This friend of mine who called was a hotel manager in a very popular tourist hotel in our town. We lived in a very small town, so almost everyone, young and old, knew the hotel. When he called me to come and get my wife from the hotel, I was shocked because that wasn't where Aria told me she was going. She told me she was hanging out with her other girlfriends at one of their friends' family restaurants. I even dropped her there myself. At first, I tried to explain to him that he was mistaken and might have been someone who looked like Aria, but he insisted that she was the one and that I should come over. The distance from the restaurant where I dropped Aria was almost a 45-minute drive to the hotel, meaning she left immediately after I dropped her there. Confused and curious to find out what was happening, I drove to the hotel and found Aria there. She was with an employee of the hotel, and the police were already involved. When I asked them to explain what was going on, I was informed that she was trespassing and that the employee I saw her with promised to give her a free room. They planned to spend hours together, but somehow they were caught. I was so surprised and disappointed at the same time. It felt like a dream or a prank. I wanted to say something like, "We were only pulling your legs," but when that didn't happen, it struck me that Aria had been cheating on me the whole while. In addition, the employee confessed that it wasn't the first time they did so, and it had been going on for weeks. Meanwhile, while the employee confessed, Aria was already on her knees, begging me not to listen to them, that she was being framed. I knew she was lying because she wasn't kidnapped to the hotel. She went there by herself to sleep with the employee. Since the manager was my friend, he wanted to let me know before he pressed charges. I was so embarrassed and heartbroken, and I even encouraged him to press charges so he could deal with Aria as he wanted. Aria was shocked when she heard my response, and her tears intensified. She begged me to talk to my friend, but my mind was made up. When she saw that I wasn't begging my friend, she begged me to take her home. I didn't say anything to her, and I watched as she cried and begged. Her affair partner was fired on the spot, and they were both arrested. To humiliate her more, I recorded her and her affair partner as they were being arrested, and after they were taken away, I posted it online. I also posted and announced on our local town's Facebook group that she was cheating on me and having an affair at a hotel with an employee. Most people in the group knew us, and that's how the news got to everyone. By the time she was bailed by her parents, she and her affair partner were the talk of town, and they faced a lot of ridicule. It was very shameful that even her close friends deserted her. It was hilarious when she tried to come home and beg me. She said she couldn't explain what pushed her to cheat on me and that she was so sorry. She claimed she still loved me and wanted us to work out, but I told her it wasn't possible. Even after she took her things out of my house and we divorced, she kept begging and crying. She even asked her best friend to try and talk to me, but I warned her and asked her to leave my house. It's been 1 year since it happened, but it still feels like yesterday. I'm having a tough time moving on, but I know that one day this will be a long-forgotten history. As for her affair partner, I don't know what happened to him, but I do know Aria did not end up with him. OP, I must admit that your ex-wife was a pretty good liar. People don't just wake up and realize they cheated on their partners. They do it with their senses intact. They do it for a reason, and your ex-wife only tried to manipulate you by saying she didn't know what pushed her. It's a good thing you didn't fall for such cheap lies, and you need to move on. I'm sure your ex-wife has moved on, and you're already history to her. So do yourself a favor and get out of the past. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts on what happened. If there is a story you would like to share with me about your own situation or someone else's, then please do not hesitate to contact me. Take care.